Thank you. Taoiseach, the rollout and launch of the NDP has been by far the most expensive and extensive ever by a government. The role of the Strategic Communications Unit, which you established and whose head you selected, must come under the closest of scrutiny and most comprehensive of reviews. Because the SCU-directed campaign, in my view, either advertently or inadvertently, has politicised elements of the civil service, whether we like it or whether we care to admit it or not. This campaign represents an abuse of taxpayers' money. I genuinely believe that. Government advertisements or funding of the media should, in my view, be at arm's length and not used for party political or party electoral objectives. The Civil Service Code in this regard, in my view, as a result of this campaign, has been breached. If you read the Longford Leader, the Limerick Leader, the Roscommon Herald, for example, you will see so-called advertisements masquerading as news articles with Fine Gael candidates prominent in those ads. Not members of government, in some cases not even members of the Oireachtas, but Fine Gael election candidates prominent in those advertisements. The Sunday World double-page spread features Senator Gabriel McFadden with a large emphasis on Athlone. Boxer gets in, but not to the same degree. And again, it's a clear electoral pitch by any yardstick, and if you look at it. And this is meant to be an ad informing the public about information around the actual the National Planning Framework or the National Development Plan itself. In essence, it's using taxpayers' money to advance and promote Fine Gael election candidates. And you can see the same trend in other constituencies as well, in terms of trying to identify key marginals and so on, and promoting issues around those marginal constituencies. We have an independent media, thanks be to God, which is essential to the health of our democracy, and speaking truth to power is an essential prerequisite for that. The media needs revenue, and we have no difficulty with advertisements that are clearly identified as advertisements. Media content partnerships between government and the media should be fully transparent. So in that context, one local editor told the Times Ireland that, quote, "This is fake news. Newspapers are struggling, and the government know that, so they've got us by then." Not going to finish for parliamentary decency. Regional newspapers were instructed to make government advertorials look like independent stories, and in some cases part of the normal news cycle. So, Taoiseach, some basic questions. Last week you were asked what was the estimate for the cost of this particular campaign. I would ask you if you could outline to the House how much it has cost and what the overall estimate for it is.
Thank you, Deputy.
Do you accept that there has been a blurring of the lines in how all of this has transpired, that it involves a politicisation of the staff in the SCU, the Strategic Communications Unit, and that essentially the entire promotion has been about Fine Gael's electoral advancement?
Taoiseach.
Yeah, well, first of all, it is at arm's length, Deputy. The Communications Unit operates at arm's length from me and from the rest of the government. It is a civil service staffed entity, and it operates at arm's length and does so in accordance with the Civil Service Code, and that is the case. Your assertion that it is the most expensive public information campaign run by government is absolutely not the case. From the records that I have, the most expensive one was one that was run by the Fianna Fáil Green Coalition, which was the Change campaign around the government's climate change agenda. That cost €15 million. The one around Transport 21, which was the public information campaign on Transport 21, again in the government, which you remember, cost €3 million. This campaign will cost about €1.5 million, which is half the cost of the Transport 21 campaign and a tenth the cost of the Change campaign. So those are the facts in relation to the cost. It is my view, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, that good communications is a virtue. It's right that good communications is a virtue. It's right and proper that the government should be able to inform the public what it's doing, what's happening, how public money is being spent and how it's acting in their interest. And I often meet people who say to me that the government isn't communicating right, it isn't getting its message across, and I believe we need to do more in that field to make sure that people are fully aware of what government is doing. But I also know what you're doing, Deputy. You don't want people to talk about Project Ireland 2040. You don't want people to talk about the good plan that we've published to improve our country, to upgrade our infrastructure in the coming years. What we've produced is a plan for the next 20 years, backed up by a 10-year infrastructural investment plan running to €116 million. And last week you didn't want to talk about it, you wanted to talk about process and procedure. This week you want to talk about the public information campaign, because you don't want people to hear about the plan. You don't want people to hear about the government's vision to make our country a better place. You don't want to hear about the €116 billion that's being invested. And this is a government that's delivering on infrastructure. Yesterday, Minister Harris opened 2 new primary care centres in Coolock and in County Kildare. There are 110 primary care centres now. There are only 40 when the party which I lead came to office. This morning on the way to work, I passed the new paediatric unit at Connolly Hospital, which is now at its 3rd storey, and within the next couple of weeks the new Lewis trams will arrive, making them longer. So what this is about, from your point of view, is pure politics. We've produced a plan, Project Ireland 2040, a €116 billion plan to invest in and improve our infrastructure, roads, rails, healthcare, housing, transport, all of those really important things. Last week you wanted to talk about process, this week you want to talk about the public information campaign. The one thing you don't want to do is actually talk about the issues.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Martin.
Very straight questions, and I've been asking them of you for the last 3 to 4 months, long before the publication of any national development plan. The Strategic Communications Unit is about the promotion of your good self and your party. That's the point, Taoiseach. It is unprecedented. 15 people in that unit. And I asked you a very simple question in terms of Fine Gael election candidates appearing in government advertisements paid by the taxpayer. The ethics of that, Taoiseach. Answer that question. The question is, how do Fine Gael candidates end up in a government advertisement paid by the taxpayer? It's not the function of the taxpayer to be funding advertisements for Fine Gael election candidates, some of whom are not even members of the Oireachtas, and certainly not members of government. And I asked you last week, and this isn't about process, it's a very fundamental thing goes to the heart of democracy and how our system works. The civil service should be completely devoid of politics. Okay? There is absolutely no way that the Fine Gael website had chapter and verse of every single item of the NDP before the Cabinet Government decision without some involvement of the SCU.
Thank you,
it defies any logical explanation to suggest otherwise. And I put that to you last week. You've avoided it week after week. That fundamental question. It is not the function of government officials or of any taxpayer-funded campaign to advance the electoral fortunes of any political party. And it's about time you faced up to that. You have blurred the lines. You're going down a dangerous route which ultimately has the potential to corrupt our democratic process itself. It's about time you saw it.
Taoiseach.
The answer to your question, Deputy, is no. We've already explained how this worked, how the Communications Unit entered into media partnerships with media organisations. What happens there is those organisations have editorial control over the content. So nobody in the unit suggested that any particular person should be interviewed whatsoever, and nobody in the unit had any editorial sign-off on the articles before they were published. Those were done by the no, well they don't because it is at arm's length, and they don't. So the unit. It's always evident when people don't want to hear the answers, Ceann Corley, because it doesn't suit them. So the unit had no role in proposing or selecting people for interview. Didn't interview anyone, and didn't have final sign-off on the editorial content. That was signed off by the editors of the publications concerned. However, I will say this. I do think it is absolutely appropriate that any sponsored content should clearly show that it is sponsored content, and I've emphasised that in the past, and I'll do it again. And if somebody is interviewed, as a general point, they should be told they are being interviewed for a commercial feature.
Thank you,
and that's the editorial policy. But I do want to say something, though, and it really is one thing now, I have to say, Ceann Comhairle, to be getting a lecture from Fianna Fáil about this sort of thing. This is the National Development Plan ad. This is the one. It doesn't say commercial feature. It says public information. What you have is a banner on the top saying it's National Development Plan, just like we had for Project Ireland 2040. It doesn't mention Government of Ireland whatsoever. The first thing is a big feature of an op-ed with a picture of Brian Cowan. Down here in the corner we have a nice little picture with yours truly, Deputy Martin, pictures in it. Next over the page with a picture of Bertie Ahern. This is the one from the Irish Times. The same thing again.
Can you restrain yourself?
Another op-ed with Brian Cowan's picture. An even bigger picture of you, Deputy. An even bigger picture of you, Deputy, in this one. This is from a local paper. This is from the Limerick Chronicle. A similar partnership done with Limerick Chronicle. Again, it says public information, National Development Plan, but nothing saying it's coming from the Government of Ireland whatsoever. And on the back of this, we have an article on the Voice of West Limerick.
Sorry, Taoiseach.
And quotes from third parties.
Taoiseach.
You're not in a position to be given lectures, Deputy.
Taoiseach. The rules of the House, Taoiseach, apply to you and to Deputy Martin equally. So please respect. Well, Deputy, we don't need any assistance. Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald.